Newsfirst at 9. Headlines.
Hello, very good evening to you. This is Primetime News coming to you live on MTV Sports and Shakti TV from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. I'm Shahin Durangpati and these are your headlines. Sri Lanka rejects the UN Human Rights High Commissioner's report. Minister G.L. Peiris reiterates in Geneva. His Eminence Cardinal Malcolm Ranjit says that foreign intervention is unnecessary to resolve problems in the country. India says engagement with Sri Lanka will help Tamils. Minister's son, who was arrested in connection with a fatal accident, released on bail. 300 students stage a camp out at the Student Center cafeteria of the Kelaniya University, demanding hostel facilities. Well, those are tonight's headlines. We now cross over to the main desk, where our main news anchors are standing by for the stories in detail.
Yes, thanks a lot, Shine, and we'll take it from here. I'm Madhushka Balasurya.
And I'm Nicola D'Souza.
And in your top story tonight, Minister of External Affairs Professor G.L. Peiris says that initiatives of the Human Rights Council have disregarded the progress Sri Lanka has made in the 5 years since the end of the 30-year war.
He made this statement while addressing the high-level segment of the 25th regular session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva today.
Judging by the persistent demands made on Sri Lanka, as well as the assertion that domestic mechanisms have failed, it is clear that there is no acknowledgement of this very tangible progress. Regrettably, as much as Sri Lanka has endeavoured to cooperate with the OHCHR, there has been a series of actions, in particular the introduction of country-specific action on Sri Lanka in this council, that have shown lack of sensitivity in dealing with delicate situations and exposed the unfair and biased manner in which issues pertaining to Sri Lanka have been addressed. Government of Sri Lanka categorically rejects the High Commissioner's report emanating from Resolution 22/1, which is in contravention of GA Resolution 60/251, as well as Council Resolutions 5/1 and 5/2 that guide the work and method of engagement of the Council. Sri Lanka will share its observations on the substantive content of the report. Mr. Chairman, for purposes of record, we wish to state that the High Commissioner's report has exceeded its mandate by making reference to and recommendations on numerous issues extraneous to the resolution. The recommendations contained in the report are arbitrary, intrusive, and of a political nature, and are not placed within the ambit of the LLRC, as demonstrated by the call to establish an international inquiry mechanism. Further, this recommendation is in contravention of a mandate granted by GA Resolution 48/141. In the government's detailed comments on the report, it is also regretted that the High Commissioner has raised concerns regarding a range of issues based on information of questionable veracity and conclusions arrived at in a selective and arbitrary manner. The references made in the Council welcoming the High Commissioner's report on Sri Lanka, even at the highest level of the UN, are regrettable, particularly considering that it is based on questionable and baseless material, including what has been processed outside the UN framework. The government of Sri Lanka reiterates its rejection of Resolution 22/1, as well as the High Commissioner's report in its entirety, which are fundamentally flawed. These initiatives disregard the substantial progress made by the government during the 5 years which have elapsed since the end of the 30-year war against terrorism.
At the high-level segment held yesterday, the U.S. Secretary for Civilian Protection, Democracy and Human Rights, Sarah Sewall, commented on Sri Lanka.
In 2012, and again this year, the Council urged the government of Sri Lanka to launch an independent investigation into the death of thousands of civilians during that country's terrible civil war. To date, the government has refused. Accordingly, the United States has introduced a resolution this year calling upon the Office of the High Commissioner to conduct an investigation into past abuses and to examine more recent attacks on journalists, human rights defenders, and religious minorities.
Here in Sri Lanka, speaking to the BBC World Service, Cabinet spokesperson Minister Keheliya Rambukwella categorically rejected the draft resolution on Sri Lanka, what has been circulated in Geneva. Noting that only a few years have passed since the LLRC report was released, Minister Rambukwella had said that it was completely unfair for the Human Rights Council to hold an investigation on Sri Lanka. He added that the draft resolution violated the principles of the United Nations. The United States draft resolution on Sri Lanka, backed by the UK, Montenegro, Mauritius and Macedonia, was circulated at the UN Human Rights Council on Monday. The resolution will be discussed at an unofficial meeting scheduled for Friday. Meanwhile, an 18-page report compiled by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillai, is to be presented to the Human Rights Council on the 26th of this month. The report primarily calls for an international mechanism to look into alleged human rights violations during the final stages of the conflict.
Meanwhile, in a letter to the UN, Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, representing human rights activists, has called on the UN Human Rights Council to pass a resolution that will include a commitment to an independent international investigation in the form of a commission of inquiry in Sri Lanka. The letter has been signed by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Bishop of Mana Rayappa Joseph, TNA parliamentarian R. Sambandhan, Northern Province Chief Minister C.V. Vigneshwaran, and human rights activists and representatives of human rights organizations from 28 countries across the globe.
Meanwhile, Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Cardinal Malcolm Ranjit, says that foreign intervention is not necessary to resolve problems in Sri Lanka. Issuing a communique, the Cardinal says that rebuilding the motherland, protecting it and making it grow is everyone's duty.
The Cardinal says that while several nations have introduced a resolution on Sri Lanka calling for an international investigation into allegations of human rights violations, if any citizen in this country attempts to take internal conflicts outside or bring external conflicts inside, no one will be victorious. He says that such actions will create space for arbitrary international intervention in the internal problems of a sovereign nation.
Questions were raised on the UN Human Rights Council session in Geneva at a media briefing convened by the UPFA in Colombo today.
UN Human Rights Council එක ලංකාවේ මේ ඉන්වෙස්ටිගේට් කරන්න ඕන මොනිටර් කරන්න ඕන කියලා ඒගොල්ලෝ යෝජනා කරනවා.
No, they can propose it. The government can reject it.
ජෙනීවා වල දැන් මේ යෝජනාවත් එක්ක ආර්ථික සම්පාදක කියන possibility එකක් නැහැ නේද? ආර්ථික සම්පාදක
To impose economic sanctions, they must go to the Security Council. Russia and China have veto power in the Security Council. They have said clearly that they will stand for Sri Lanka at any instance. Thereby imposing sanctions via the United Nations is a difficult task.
Now, on the subject of the draft resolution on Sri Lanka at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, India's External Affairs Minister Salman Khurshid said that Indian Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh had informed President Mahinda Rajapaksa that his officials had not yet had time to study the resolution. This was when the two leaders met on the sidelines of the BIMSTEC summit. Khurshid also said that engagement with the Sri Lankan government would help Tamils. The minister had made this statement while speaking to reporters on board the Indian Prime Minister's return flight from the BIMSTEC summit in Myanmar.
Khurshid said, quote, "I hope that our friends and critics in Tamil Nadu will keep foremost in their minds the interests of the Tamils of the Northern Province," unquote. He added that when he visited the Northern Province in Sri Lanka, he did not hear a single voice calling on India not to engage with the Sri Lankan government. Khurshid noted that, quote, "Everyone in politics has a right to promote their interests as long as they keep the national interest in mind." Khurshid said President Rajapaksa had asked India to use its officers to persuade Tamil parties to engage with Parliament on devolution of powers to the northern and eastern provinces when he met with the Indian Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh on the sidelines of BIMSTEC. The Indian External Affairs Minister added that both leaders had also discussed the arrests of fishermen who had transgressed the maritime border. He said that President Rajapaksa had argued that Indian trawlers were damaging the marine ecosystem, hurting the long-time sustainability of the fishing grounds of Sri Lanka. Khurshid said that President Rajapaksa was at pains to emphasize that both sets of fishermen were ethnic Tamils and that he was defending the interests of Tamils in Sri Lanka.
Let's take a quick look at the newspaper cartoon of the day.
Now moving on to some dire international news. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov are due to hold crucial talks to try to ease tensions over the Ukraine crisis. The U.S. accuses Moscow of deploying troops in Ukraine's Crimea region, describing it as an act of aggression, a claim denied by the Kremlin. Despite the sharp differences, both sides have hinted they would prefer to start a dialogue. Meanwhile, yesterday, Russia test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile.
Several hundred people rallied in the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don to support the Russian-speaking population in Crimea and in other regions of Ukraine. Demonstrators were holding Russian flags and slogans urging support for Crimea. Among the demonstrators were volunteers who have just come back from Ukraine, where they went to offer support. Meanwhile, several hundred demonstrators gathered for a rally in the eastern Ukrainian city of Donetsk, calling for Ukraine to stay united. Pro-Ukrainian protesters in Donetsk said Russia should stay out. The rally was held just one day after pro-Russian demonstrators occupied the regional government building in Donetsk, besieging lawmakers as they voted to support the protesters but stopped short of meeting their demands for a split from Kiev. The chaotic scene was one of the boldest actions yet by pro-Russian youths after several days of rallies in eastern and southern cities that Kiev says are organized by Moscow as a pretext to invade. In Moscow yesterday, President Vladimir Putin, who rarely does anything without a purpose behind it, was making a deliberate show of being calm and collective. A few hours later, it was time for the US President to respond. At a media briefing in Washington, President Obama said that Putin's rationale for his incursion into Crimea was not fooling anybody and that Russian meddling in Ukraine would isolate Moscow.
Some of this has been reported, that the suggestion somehow that the Russian actions have been clever strategically. I actually think that this has not been a sign of strength, but rather is a reflection that countries near Russia have deep concerns and suspicions about this kind of meddling, and if anything, it will push many countries further away from Russia. There is the ability for Ukraine to be a friend of the West's and a friend of Russia's, as long as none of us are inside of Ukraine trying to meddle and intervene, certainly not militarily, with decisions that properly belong to the Ukrainian people.
Meanwhile, in a televised interview, former Ukrainian Prime Minister and opposition politician Yulia Tymoshenko called for sanctions on Russia and highlighted the fact that the US and the UK had promised to protect Ukraine's integrity.
Ну, по-перше, я дійсно сказала, що революція не закінчена, але я тоді ще не знала, що в Криму розпочнеться війна.
Well, first of all, Ukraine cannot stand up to Russia's military power alone to the extent of being able to protect its territory. I think you know that in 1994, the Budapest Memorandum was signed by UK, Russia, US and Ukraine. It was signed when Ukraine agreed to relinquish its nuclear arsenal. It was then that the US, the UK and Russia guaranteed that once we give up our nuclear arms, these countries will protect the integrity of our territory.
Думку і ставлення до всіх подій суспільства і всіх лідерів громадянського суспільства.
In a demonstration of support for Ukraine's fledgling government and a new swipe at Russia, Secretary of State John Kerry visited Kiev and offered $1 billion in an American loan guarantee and pledges of technical assistance. The Ukrainian Black Sea Fleet, meanwhile, is still under siege, with Russian military vessels blockading access in and out of the military harbour of Sevastopol and pro-Russian protesters keeping the Ukrainian troops holed up in their headquarters. According to President Putin, there are no Russian forces on the ground. They are just Ukrainian volunteers helping the Russian forces. However, according to experts, that's not the way it looks on the ground.
Meanwhile, here at home, Afghan President Hamid Karzai arrived in Sri Lanka this evening for a 3-day official visit. The head of state was welcomed by a delegation including Prime Minister D.M. Jayaratne. According to the official website of the Presidential Secretariat, the ceremonial welcome will be accorded to the visiting dignitary at the Presidential Secretariat tomorrow, followed by bilateral talks between the two leaders. 3 memoranda of understanding between the two countries are expected to be signed during President Karzai's visit to Sri Lanka. This is the first ever state visit to Sri Lanka by the President of Afghanistan. Meanwhile, a group of female students of the Kelaniya University have occupied a canteen area of the university due to an issue pertaining to their hostels. The students note that they were forced to resort to this measure as authorities who identified their issue are yet to find a solution to it.
The hostel crisis plaguing the Kelaniya University has intensified. What you see behind me is the student centre of the university. It has been transformed into a girls' dormitory. These students charge that the authorities have failed to provide solutions to their issues. Around 300 students are currently housed at these premises. The Students' Union of the university charges that around 800 students were denied hostel privileges last year. In 2010, they wanted to suppress the students, so they implemented a change in the hostels. This resulted in about 800 students losing hostel privileges.
We began this struggle on Monday. We have been holding discussions with the authorities since then. They recognize that our issue is a legitimate one and that they should provide solutions to it.
We inquired about the matter from the Vice Chancellor of the Kelaniya University.
None
of the national universities are capable of completely solving their hostel problems. We provide hostel facilities for first-year students and students in their final year. If you look at the figures, you see an issue pertaining to female first-year students. We have provided facilities for 92% of the students who applied. We have also provided facilities to 95% of the final year students that applied. However, responding to a query raised in Parliament yesterday, Minister of Higher Education S.B. Dissanayake noted that universities have only spent less than 50% of the funds allocated to their ministry. There is no issue about funding. What we are trying to do is to keep our expenses below 70% of the allocated funds. In 2010, a majority of the universities spent less than 50% of the allocated funds.
Minister Bandula Gunawardana's son, Chathra Gunawardana, who was arrested in connection to a deadly motor accident, was granted bail today on sureties amounting to 200,000 rupees. Bail was granted after he was presented before the Mathura Additional Magistrate today.
The motor accident took place on the 20th of February at the Browns Hill Junction on the Tangol-Mathura main road. The victim, who was run over by a jeep, was admitted to the Karapitiya Teaching Hospital ICU. He succumbed to his injuries yesterday.
Bail was granted to the defendant after the court took into consideration several factors such as the voluntary surrender of the suspect, reporting the accident promptly and assisting in taking the victim to hospital. The case will be taken up for consideration once again on the 9th of May.
පසුගිය පෙබරවාරි 20 වෙනි දින ඔහු අත්අඩංගුවට ගනු ලැබුවේ රියානතුරක් සිදු කර පුද්ගලයෙකුට තුවාල කිරීම සම්බන්ධයෙන්.
He was arrested on the 20th of February for injuring an individual in a motor accident. He was presented in court on that charge as well. Because the victim passed away, charges were filed stating that the victim died due to negligent and reckless behavior of the defendant. When the case was taken up again, court set bail at 200,000 rupees and released him. We hope to file charges against him in connection to not possessing a driver's license as well.
මේ රටදී ලබාගත් රියදුරු බලපත්‍රයක් නොමැතිවීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඔහුට විරුද්ධව ඉදිරියේදී නඩු පැවරීමට අපි කටයුතු කිරීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
In other local news, the vice principal and 4 students of Royal College Thoramgaslanda have been hospitalized following an attack launched by an unidentified group. At a media briefing convened today, police media spokesperson SSP Ajit Rohana said that a woman has been arrested in connection with the assault.
The assault was carried out after a ball being used in sports practices by students of Royal College in Thoramgaslanda flew over the school fence and hit a motor vehicle. Irritated over the incident, the owner of the vehicle and a female had arrived at the school and yelled at the principal.
He parked his vehicle and started yelling. He was accompanied by a woman and asked who the principal is and what his name was. I told him not to blame the children because they do not understand. So I told him to go speak to the principal, who is in his office, or he could go speak to the teachers in charge of sports.
When the couple had met the principal had said that if they are to be compensated for the damages caused to the vehicle through the school's development committee, a complaint should be lodged with the police. The owner had thereafter left the school. He returned a short while later and assaulted the principal and the group of students. The attackers held the principal by his tie and tried to hit him. I pushed them and came out. They attacked me and it hit my arm. I think it was a kick. When I took an X-ray and checked, I had 2 fractured fingers. I have to get treatment now. 4 students are currently receiving in-house treatment at the Viddigama hospital following the assault. According to reports, the vehicle which the group had travelled in had collided with another vehicle while fleeing the school.
Of
the 4 individuals who travelled in this vehicle, 2 have been hospitalised. The vice principal and 4 students of the school have also been hospitalised. The Viddigama police are already conducting investigations into this incident and statements are being recorded from both parties. Evidence is also being obtained from both parties. A woman who was travelling in the vehicle is in police custody.
Moving into the political sphere, a media briefing was organised by the United People's Freedom Alliance regarding the upcoming provincial council polls in Colombo today.
For generations, they have been fighting. Ranil is still there, but everyone else leaves. In the end, it will only be Ranil and a board saying UNP. Everyone else would have gone away. When charismatic people such as D.S. Senanayake, Dudley Senanayake, J.R. Jayawardena and Premadasa stand up, they look like leaders. But when Ranil stands up and waves his hand, the whole of Sri Lanka knows he is not a leader. Of course it is easy for us, because with not much effort, we get to remain as ministers for a long period yet to come. Even the president will be there for even longer term and hand this over to his children, and I watch it being handed down in turn to the children's children. And then I think around that time another party instead of the UNP will be there.
Meanwhile, United National Party parliamentarian Sajid Premadasa participated at a public rally in the Ambalantota area today.
Several female representatives of the United People's Freedom Alliance joined the United National Party at the public rally held in the Pahala Beragama area in Ambalantota. This is a period when the country is being driven into a deep abyss. Following the war victory, they could have used the funds that they saved through the end of the war for social welfare. However, what they are doing is utilizing it for welfare of high-ranking officials. Let us use this next vote to drive away this corrupt administration. Let me reiterate that Hambantota will herald the start of this campaign.
Still in local news, Newsfirst U reporters Chamit Veerasinghe from Pothaville and Upal Mahesh from Ampegama filed these reports.
An accident occurred on the Pothaville Panama Road in the Ulla area in Arugambe yesterday. The driver of the motor vehicle died at the scene when his bike struck a tree after he failed to control its speed. Further investigations are being conducted by the Pothaville police. This is the Agalia Ulkada Bridge. The bridge is used by residents in Agalia and Kuttiawata to reach the Baddegama town. The concrete slabs and the protective sides of the bridge have not been renovated and it is extremely dangerous. Therefore, the residents request this bridge, which has not been renovated for several years, be renovated or a new bridge installed in its place.
Speaking in Parliament today, leader of the JVP MP Anurakumara Dissanayake posed a question on Sri Lankan Airlines.
The estimated loss of Air Lanka is around 70 billion over the past 3 years. 1 billion was spent on farmers' pensions, while state sector employees received salary increments amounting to 16 billion rupees. However, over the past 3 years, this company has incurred a loss amounting to 70 billion. What plans have you put in place to curb this loss? Air Lanka suffered over twice the estimated loss that you planned for. Honourable Speaker, this company has not been able to even estimate their losses.
Now let's take a look at some of the views expressed on the political stage.
We ask for the vote to build the country. They ask for the vote to build themselves. We know the taste of rice. They know the taste of the vote.
කොමිස් ගහන්නෝ, පගා ගහන්නෝ, කොන්ත්‍රාත් ගන්නෝ, බාර් දමන්නෝ, බත්ලස දන්නෝ, වෙල හඳුනන්නෝ. කනකොල කන්නෝ, මේව නොදන්නෝ.
බුලත් කොලේ ප්‍රධාන මාතෘත්වය තියෙන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂය.
The beetle leaf is headed by the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. Our kind do not rant about various things. Our kind do not shout at microphones.
වැරදිලා එක්සත් ජාතික පක්ෂයේ හිටියනම් තරුණ කැලට අනිච්චන් දුක්ඛ.
Although they do not come to the village and the country, that is the nature of politics. These learned politicians only come during election time. In case they have diarrhea, they will run to someone else's toilet without even a bucket. You know this.
නැතුව දන්නෝනේ. දේශපාලනයට එන්නේ හම්බ කරන්න. බලය ඉල්ලන්නේ ධනය රැස් කරන්න.
Today, people come into politics to earn. They ask for the vote to hoard wealth. We have not stolen public funds. We have utilized public funds to serve the people. You may vote for various people from time to time, but in the end, you will have to join the Janata Vimukti Perona.
Today the wildlife minister is looking for the drone that has been lost. He does not have to look anywhere else. He can find it in Sirikota. The rogues are there. They have only trampled Udupiyali leaves and they make their plans in glass houses. That is Ranil Wickremesinghe's job. The only thing he can do is go to the international community and complain about Sri Lanka. He cannot do anything else.
In the recent past, they kept raving about casinos. They cannot say that this is a government that did not bring development to the village. They cannot say that this is a government that did not build roads and develop infrastructure. But they cannot not say anything. Wickremesinghe has fallen to the level of a child in a classroom because he has nothing to say. The same applies to the other groups that are parallel to him.
SM Marika points out that the proper use of the internet requires self-discipline, and Sunday schools play a vital role in inculcating this trait in individuals. He stated this while participating in a rally in Kalubowila.
අද තරුණයෝ අන්තර්ජාලය පරිහරණය කරන ඉතා ශීඝ්‍ර ලෙස Facebook එකෙන්
The youth today use the internet, and due to Facebook they are more intelligent than the youth in the past. They know the consequences of politicians who do wrong anywhere in the world, and they are angry that the politicians here are not treated in the same way. This is one reason why they want to ban Facebook. However, using the internet has its downside as well. Banning Facebook while only concentrating on the downside is not right. Then we will once again be like frogs in a well. There is only one way to stop this, and that is to instill self-discipline in the youth and children. Sending them to Sunday school is the only way.
ස්වයං විනයක් ඇති කරගන්න ඕන. ඒක කරන්න පුළුවන් එකම ක්‍රමය දහම් පාසල් යෑමෙන් පමණයි.
Meanwhile, the Unity Through Power Devolution movement convened a media briefing in Colombo today.
ආණ්ඩුවේ හොරකම අඩු නෙත් නෑ. ඇමතිවරුන්ගේ හොරු අල්ලන්නත් බෑ.
The thievery of the government has not reduced. The thievery of the ministers cannot be caught. When you complain about the ministers' thievery to the fraud and corruption authorities, they do not examine it. That is the type of government we have today. When election time comes, Hakim and the president have problems. And then he goes to the provinces and says, do not vote for him. He asks the people to vote for the Congress alone.
මෙයාට ඡන්ද දෙන්න එපා. අපිට කොංග්‍රස් එකට තනියම ඡන්ද දෙන්න. தமிழ் மக்கள் இந்த அரசாங்கம் தமிழ் மக்களுக்கு தாங்களாக முன்வந்து
We cannot think that this government will provide a solution to the ethnic problem and the problems of the Tamil people. The truth is that after 18 rounds of talks within a year, a solution could not be reached. Although we have explained to them about militarization and the acquisition of the lands of Tamil people, there has been no response and no report. While the Tamil people are being put under more pressure, there is no solution to the problem. That is the situation today. They may say that this is just a detail. We can hope that there will be a change before the vote on the 26th. The change should not be just another story. This government is fooling the people of this country, especially the Sinhalese people. They murdered 3 people in Valiveria. They oppressed the media. If you look at the law, what happened to Shirani Bandaranaike? There needs to be a democratic environment in the south. We need a change in government. We hope that this resolution will contain all these changes.
இந்த தீர்மானத்தில் உள்ளடக்கப்பட்டிருக்கிறதாக நாங்கள் கருதுகிறோம். தமிழ் மக்கள் துன்பங்களுக்கு விடைகளை தரும்.
The American resolution, which we hoped would answer the pain of the Tamil people, has become a deception. There is a problem with regard to political prisoners. The people who were arrested, the people who surrendered, the people who were abducted are all in custody. There is no solution to their problem in this resolution. At the same time, there are 90,000 widows in the northern and eastern provinces. This resolution has been compiled in a fashion that supports the government and completely deceives the people. Although there were great expectations, there is nothing in this resolution. It is not that the Tamil people do not want the processes of the international community and Geneva, but if we are to keep our faith in that alone, we will never be free. We must join with the Sinhala people in the south and prepare for a new battle. It is through this battle and democratic activity that we can create an environment for us to live in freedom.
The 117th media workshop organized by Newsfirst was held in Hinguragoda today. At the workshop, students were made aware of news reporting and media literacy.
Over 300 students attended the workshop, which is an island-wide program initiated by Newsfirst for the younger generation of Sri Lanka. The Newsfirst team arrived at the Ananda Balika Vidyalaya in Hinguragoda this morning on an invitation extended by the school. The Newsfirst team that received a warm welcome commenced the workshop by educating the students on media literacy verbally and practically. Students showed keen interest in the new media segment of the workshop.
Now moving into some sports news, it's cricket. India gained a consolation victory in the Asia Cup today following defeats against Pakistan and Sri Lanka with an emphatic 8-wicket victory over Minnows Afghanistan. India successfully chased down the 160-run target in 32.2 overs, losing just 2 wickets. Winning the toss, India invited Afghanistan to take first lease of the wicket. A promising opening partnership of 30 runs between Afghanistan's Noor Ali and Navroz Mangal came to an end with Mangal being dismissed for 5 runs. 7 of the Afghan batsmen failed to reach double figures in the face of an impressive bowling performance by Ravichandran Ashwin and Ravindra Jadeja. Samiullah Shenwari provided a flicker of hope for the Afghans, scoring his 5th half-century in ODIs. Jadeja ended with figures of 4 for 30 in his 10 overs, while Ashwin ended with 3 for 31.
And we'll find the gap for 4. That's a...
India reached the target with little incident, losing 2 wickets in the process. Ajinkya Rahane and Shikhar Dhawan both made half-centuries before being dismissed by Muwaiz Ashraf and Mohammad Nabi respectively, leaving Rohit Sharma and Dinesh Karthik to finish the job.
That should be the winning. Already decided yesterday when Pakistan beat Bangladesh. Rahane got a half-century today, so did Shikhar Dhawan. Virat Kohli.
To please come forward and receive the check, $5,000 from Mr.
And that's a wrap of your primetime news for tonight. Thank you for joining us. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Nicola De Zoiza.
And I'm Adushka Balasuriya, wishing you a good night.
Hotline 0114-896-896. www.newsfirst.lk. Feedback at newsfirst.lk.